everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up, and let's just get right into it. So we're going to, again, not talk about all the books I read this month, but I'm going to go through like a really brief like data dump and then talk about the books that I feel like I have more to say about. So first of all, I read 30 books in January. 22 of those were from the library, 5 of them were from Overdrive, 2 of them were physically owned books, these 2, and then 1 book I read from Kobo Plus, which I am subscribed to, really getting my $8 worth. My top genres were fantasy, LGBT, plus horror, sci-fi, and historical. I read 83% fiction and 17% nonfiction. We are over 10%. So I'm on my way to my goal of reading at least 10% nonfiction this year. I have read 83, and again, same split of books, 83% print and 17% digital. And my average book rating was 3.26 stars. I have not star rated books for maybe like 2 or 3 years because I tend to write a review for every book I read anyways, and I feel like that's kind of a better way to judge what I actually thought about a book than just like looking at the star rating, which can often be so specific. Storygraph lets you do quarter stars, which is so great for someone like me who's super indecisive, but sometimes it can feel like splitting hairs. Like, okay, I'll give a book a 3.25 and then come back to it later and be like, why did I do that? Like, just pick 3 or 3.5. But I kind of have been curious to go back to star rating because I feel like that's just kind of another data point that could be fun to look at. Like, you know, what books do I give the highest stars? What month of year do I have the highest average rating? Like, can I get better at pinpointing what a star rating means to me? I think I would like to try. I think I would like to have that extra data. So I did decide to start giving my books, the books I read, star ratings again. I gave every book I read in January, minus nonfiction, because I still just don't really want to rate nonfiction or biographies. So I gave every book minus nonfiction and biographies a star rating, and my average was 3.26. That feels low, but like it's above a 3. That's positive. I feel like Goodreads star inflation has hit the book review economy hard. If a book has under a 4, that's considered like irredeemably bad. I feel like it's a little bit better on Storygraph, again, because you can have half stars and, you know, quarter stars, so people can get a little bit more specific and granular with it. I feel like people are also a little bit more picky / honest on Storygraph because it's less of a social media website where you're like trying to get likes and follows and not really rock the boat because authors are also on there too. Storygraph is a lot more insular, solo. It's, again, really more of a book reviewing platform than it is a social media site, so I think people tend to be a little bit more honest and a little bit more harsh on there. But even then, you rarely see a book go below a 3.5 average rating. But I don't consider that bad. Like, a lot of the books I gave 3 stars or even 2.75s were books that I liked, but books that I just didn't think were objectively good. So there's my star ratings, my star rating rant. The highest rated books I had this month were Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, which I gave 5 stars, and then The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood, which I gave 4.5, and also North Sun by Ethan Rutherford, which I gave 4.5 stars as well. So let's talk about my favorites first, I guess. Yeah, Blood Meridian got a 5. I loved Blood Meridian. Cormac McCarthy can be hit or miss for me. Well, not really hit or miss. I really liked The Road. I loved The Road. I don't know if I would give it a 5-star because that was when I wasn't doing star ratings. It might get a 5. I feel like it's more of a 4.5, but I really liked The Road. I liked No Country for Old Men, but not as much. And then Blood Meridian I just loved. Like, it felt like it combined all the things that I liked separately about The Road and about No Country for Old Men, and it was just both of those books' strengths and not really any of their weaknesses, and I just loved the message of the book and what it was doing, and the prose was amazing and so vivid and feverish and evocative, and the ending was so crazy, and then the epilogue is even crazier. It's like, it's just doing something so special and so interesting. It's a book I would have loved to read for class and like discuss with other people and really talk about it. It's so interesting to me that it's like a frontier novel, a Western, but it's an anti-Western or anti-frontier novel, or perhaps it's like the only true Western novel because it is so unflinching about the violence that period inflicted, the violence of westward expansion and southward expansion, which was just so interesting to me, and the themes of these twin desires to possess and destroy and the inherent warlike nature of man. But those are themes that are disputed by the main character. Like, it's someone else who is espousing those ideas, and the main character is calling them crazy and like disagreeing with them, but then the main character ends up being so ineffective in fighting back against that character that you're like, maybe that is what Cormac McCarthy believed. But it's such an interesting book thematically. And then also I love that it's a coming of age novel, kind of, about the kid that so categorically denies you access to the protagonist's inner life. It is a coming of age novel where you never are in the protagonist's head, where in fact the protagonist disappears for large chunks of Blood Meridian, for large chunks of the books, and you only kind of see him in these little mentions that he's there in the background or by the fire, and for a long time he's not even mentioned as that. Like, he's just gone from the story. You just know that he's in the gang because of like all the violence that they are inflicting upon the Native Americans and the Mexican people. Like, it's so violent, and I think it's really tempting to read the main character, again, because he's our protagonist, because we're, you know, we, even though we're not in his head, I think we still instinctively are trained to want to root for the person whose perspective we're reading from, or the person who started off the book, and he's, you know, a young kid who was seemingly, you know, abandoned and has had such hard times. You want to see him succeed and be better. And there are these like few moments where he seems to be kinder or more empathetic than the people around him, and then but you just can't forget the fact that he is still in this gang and is still doing all of these things, and that violence rebounds back on the entire gang eventually. Not just the bad guys in the gang, but even our protagonist too. It's just so interesting, and the ending is just, yeah, this is a book that I'll be thinking about for a pretty long time, I think. One I really enjoyed. It's rare for me to give out 5 stars, but I feel like this one just really deserved it. This was one I rated even before I decided to go back and give everything a rating this year. Go back to start doing that, because it just, when something's a 5-star, you know. A 5-star is a 5-star. And Blood Meridian was just a 5-star for me. Yeah, it's really funny when you read a book that everybody loves and says is amazing, and you're like, and then you finally read it and you're like, has anyone heard of this book? Like, this is so good. Like, yeah, it really is that good. So I definitely recommend Blood Meridian. And then I also really liked The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. This is a book I read for my like novelist plus kind of exploration into romantasy vlogs type video, which hopefully will be up by the time I post this. I think it will. It's kind of a different style of video that I'm doing, so I talk about that book a lot in that video if you want to hear me go more into depth about it and why it specifically worked for me. But I just also want to shout it out in this video because I loved that book. I'm really excited to read the sequel. It's on its way to me. Great book. I think this is such a reductive comp title, but if you want something that's like Tombs of Adawan x Gideon the Ninth, I think this might work for you. It's tonally, it's not similar to Gideon the Ninth at all. It's again much more similar to Tomb of Adawan, but there is like a death cult, a character who is escaping from a death cult, and a lesbian romance. So you take some elements from Gideon the Ninth, you lose some. North Sun by Ethan Rutherford I really liked. This is a book I just picked up on a whim. I don't even know how. My library just randomly got this book, and I really, really enjoyed this book. It's, to me, felt like a mix between Moby Dick and The Terror, the TV show, which I love. I love AMC's Dave Kajanik's The Terror and Suhyu. I love that show. It's one of my favorite shows. I don't watch a lot of TV, but that show is one that I will always love and rewatch. And this book felt very similar to that show with its very like haunting nature. It's kind of just a hint of supernatural or speculative elements, but mostly just feeling very grounded in these characters who are stuck on this boat that they didn't really want to be on in the first place. The themes of exploitation, of the powerless being hurt by the powerful, of people who are overlooked by the people in power, and the themes, again, exploitation both of the whales, because it's about a whaling expedition, but also the innocent people, the ship's boys who go through a lot during the journey. Yeah, and it's told in this very odd and distinct structural style, but also writing style. So this is not going to be a book that's for everybody. I can see people picking it up and thinking it's boring, or thinking it's pretentious, or thinking it's hard to connect to the main characters because they're never really named, and we spend a lot of time in this very impersonal third-person narration talking about them and about what they're going through. But I don't know, it just all came together and worked really well for me, and I just really enjoyed it and thought it was very unique and was doing something very special and different. I think this has a good chance of getting nominated for the Ursula K. Le Guin Award for 2026, and I will be nominating it when nominations open in March. It also came out on my birthday last year. I didn't realize that. It came out on March 11th, 2025. That's such a piece of serendipity. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I feel like the speculative elements are present enough that it feels like something that people, like, it's not something you could recommend for people who are just looking for historical fiction. And I feel like we got just enough questions answered at the end to feel satisfied, but there's also so much left that you could still think about and wonder about. Again, this is one that I would have loved to discuss in like a class or in a book club, because I feel like it would be really interesting seeing other people's interpretations of it. So really liked North Sun by Ethan Rutherford. I also really liked Roadside Picnic by Boris and Arkady Strugatsky. We got this one. It's been out of print in the US, I think, for like 30 years or something, and it finally got reprinted, and it has a foreword from Ursula K. Le Guin and an afterword from the surviving brother, I think, Boris, which was so interesting. Ursula K. Le Guin's foreword was amazing. The afterword was so amazing and so illuminating. What I think is, like, the book itself is really interesting. I think if you like Jeff Vandermeer, you'll like it, and if you like Kathy Koja, you'll like it, because it's very gross, nasty sci-fi, which I love. It's just very interesting. It's again a book that it's not gonna be for everyone. I see a lot of people in the story reviews calling it boring, saying nothing happens, saying, you know, it's just not what we, I think, as 21st century Americans expect a sci-fi book to be, but it is so thoughtful and so smart and is really interested in these big picture questions, which I think is interesting. Again, feels very Vandermeer. But yeah, I really liked the book itself, but then also I think that the circumstances around the publication of the book are so interesting. The afterword was really, really interesting, talking about the censorship in the Soviet Union and how difficult it was, like, not only get this book published, but to get other books of theirs published and other like publishing projects of theirs off the ground. And how the one thing I found really, really fascinating was that Boris talking about how he thought like it would be so vindicating to like sit down and write this afterward and like roast all the people who turned the book down or like tried to censor the book and who he had to fight against. But he's like, looking at like all these names, they're either dead or so unimportant that they might as well be dead. Like, what is the point in like gloating and like being like, I won, I did it, because none of this matters anymore. Like how quickly politics and governments can shift and become unimportant. That was really interesting to me too. But I really liked Roadside Picnic as well. I'm making all my coworkers read it. We're gonna watch the movie and we're gonna watch the adaptation that was inspired by it, I think. So that was very fun. I did enjoy Roadside Picnic. Okay, least favorites. Talking about my least favorite books I read this month. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about Automatic Noodle by Annalee Newitz. This is one that, again, I went into it hoping that I would like, but knowing that it probably wasn't going to be for me. It's cozy sci-fi. It's about these sentient robots who wake up one day and realize that the owner of the shop has basically gone away. They've been in stasis mode for a pretty long time, and they decide to start the restaurant back up again, make it what they want it to be, and they have to hide the fact that the robots own and run the store, because robots can work in stores but they can't own property, and then also having to deal with like being review bombed on sci-fi Yelp because people hate robots. And I just don't like cozy books where the entire plot revolves around setting up a small business. I've learned. I didn't like Legends and Lattes for that reason, and I didn't like Automatic Noodle for that reason either. Just, I feel like it makes the books feel very episodic and very much like kind of vignettes or short stories that are kind of loosely joined together by an overarching plot. There really isn't an overarching plot in Automatic Noodle. It's just them trying to set up this restaurant, and each chapter is them like facing these tiny little problems, but then very easily solving the problems or just deciding that they don't matter or just deciding to ignore them. So it's a very unsatisfying reading experience for me personally. I just don't really like that style. I also feel like the characters were quite underdeveloped and quite uninteresting. The fact that they're robots, first of all, they just don't really feel like robots. They feel like humans, just with like extra limbs or with super fast texting abilities. And then there's some interesting commentary done with the robots. Like, okay, obviously in this book they're being used as an allegory, but they're being used as an allegory for too many things, I think. The most obvious one is a xenophobia allegory, an allegory for being anti-immigration. They are review bombed on Yelp because it feels very similar rhetoric to anti-immigrant rhetoric. The robots are taking our jobs, they're not authentic, they don't make food like humans do, you know, they don't know us, stuff like that. People writing off the food without ever trying it. So there's obviously the anti-immigration metaphor, but there's also a lot of like comparison or allegory for them as like queer, as trans or gay. Like some of the robots were like made to look one way and then modify their bodies to look another way. There's also disability allegory, I think, here going on as well, again with the idea that some of them are considered like just they have very different bodies than humans, and so some of them need like mobility aids to get around, stuff like that. And I feel like it's just such a broad allegory. They're being used as an allegory for so many different marginalized groups that we can't actually dig into what it's like to live as any of those marginalized groups. Instead of either being so weird and so robotic that they are their own entire individual thing and we can just explore that, they are kind of an allegory for many different human things. And I don't think that worked for me or worked for the story thematically. I think it would have to be a longer book to actually adequately dig into all these various little topics. The one thing I think the book should have focused on is the idea of labor and being able to sell and own your own labor, because that was the most interesting thing to me, but it's such a minor part of this book because it's fighting for space with so many other different things. The robots all live in California, which has split off from the rest of the United States, and in the United States, robots don't have any rights. In California, robots, a certain level of sentient robots, have some rights. They can sell their labor, and that's pretty much it. They can't own businesses or property, they can't vote, they can't get married, they can't do anything. They can sell their labor, but nothing else. And some of the robots think about this and how unfair this is. We can sell our labor but not profit off of it. We can work in a kitchen but not own it. We can't do anything that makes us part of the community. People are scared of us and don't consider us part of the community because we don't have the right to be a part of it. We can't integrate into a community and show the humans that we're just like them because they don't let us. We can't actually be part of this community. But that is so interesting to me. Again, the concepts of freedom and what it means to actually really be free and be a part of a community. Not just the right to sell your labor to someone else, but the right to own your labor and profit off of your own labor. Very communist, I love it. Unfortunately, this is brought up very briefly, not really done anything with, and then by the end of the story, the robots are just like, the plot of the book becomes that they are fighting off this like troll group who are trying to review bomb their restaurant and like get them shut down. And they successfully defeat those guys, and by the end of the book, they're just kind of happy to work in their restaurant, that if anyone finds out a human doesn't own it, it will be shut down and taken away from them. So they, like, nothing has physically changed about their situation or about the situation of robots in general, but they are just happy to work in their noodle restaurant. And I guess kind of the implication there is that by breaking this new ground, by being part of this noodle restaurant and running this noodle restaurant and like showing people that, you know, robots can make just as good food as humans and robots can enjoy noodles and be a part of the community or whatever, they will slowly enact social change, which will lead to legislative change, but it's not explicit and it's not really a part of this book. I feel like I would have liked for that to be the main focus of the book rather than this kind of extremely, like, I guess funny but not super interesting or impactful storyline about like QAnon review bombing groups. Like, it's just not super, it wasn't super intriguing to me. But anyways, yeah, so I think I found that this was what really made me realize that specifically books about like running a small business do not work for me. I also, sadly, I read the sequel to These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs. I really liked that first book. The sequel really let me down. I did not enjoy it nearly as much. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really like it, which is so sad because I really, really liked the first book. I thought that the relationships between the characters were so interesting. The twist at the end was so well done and made me so interested in where we would go next. It has such an explosive ending that feels so earned. And then the second book just, I felt like, had major second book in a series syndrome, where the entire book is just the characters standing around for 300 pages until all of a sudden everybody decides to act because they're in a book and they need to start the climax. Like, it just did not feel well paced at all. It's split between these two settings. It's about Chono and Six, disguised as Essek Nightfoot, who go back to the Empire to try to help the Javeni in the Empire and deal with the events of the end of the first book. And it's also the Javeni characters and June Ironway on Kapamame, dealing with the Javeni settling into their new home, and a strange seemingly serial killer that has settled on the ship and is like killing off important members of the Giovanni government. So it's them trying to figure out what's going on with that. And then it's June, and then it's Chono and Six doing political maneuverings. Unfortunately, neither plotline was super interesting to me. The Kapamame plotline was a little bit more interesting because there's this like murder mystery going on. But Lise is off page for like 80% of this book, and I did not understand the decision. I guess it's because if she was there, she would have handled that shit. She would have caught the serial killer immediately, because I just don't understand why she had to not be present in that section, because I feel like that could have been a real bright spot of that section. I really liked their relationship in the first book, and Lise and June working together trying to figure out who this person is and what's going on and who is trying to threaten June's life, who has it out for her so badly, could have been really interesting. But instead, Lise is just gone for the vast majority of this book, and we have nothing to really grab onto. And instead, Bethany Jacobs tries to jangle some keys in front of my face with a throuple, which we all know I love, but I didn't care about this throuple because it's between these three characters who are not in the first book, and we don't really slowly get introduced to them and their relationship over the course of the book. We are just kind of immediately told that all three of them are interested in each other, but won't act on those feelings because of nebulous reasons. And it's really boring, and it feels like very flat characters, minus the one major character who was in the last book, Massar. It just didn't do anything for me. It was just very boring and badly paced, I think, that relationship development. I wish we could have, again, slowly been introduced to each of those characters and had that relationship between the three of them built up, rather than just being told they're all interested in each other. They would be great together, but they won't get together because of reasons. It was just weird. And then again, I don't know if this is just me, maybe. This is just me, maybe. I did not really know how old any of these characters were supposed to be in this throuple, because Massar, I was assuming, was in his like 30s, 40s, like that's the vibe he's giving off. I think that's how old he is. And then one of the characters, oh my god, what is his name? Bene is talked about like he's 15. He's like this younger character. He's June's cousin or something, and he's younger than them. They talk about him like he's 12 sometimes. I'm like, okay, maybe he's in his like 20s, I don't know. And then the other person in the throuple, Effingen, they talk about her like she's fucking 80 years old. I'm like, how old are any of these people in this throuple that we're supposed to ship together? I need some clarification, because we've got a woman they talk about like she's a grandmother, a man who is just like, again, normal middle age, and then a person they talk about like he's a toddler. So it's like, what's going on here? What's going on here? Again, maybe I just missed the part where they introduce everybody's ages, but it made it really hard for me to, again, to be invested in that dynamic, invested in that relationship, because I was just like, what do these people have in common? Like, what could they be talking about? What makes them interested in each other? Like, it was so disappointing as a throuple. Again, I love a throuple, but this just didn't do it for me. And then the other plot line, it's supposed to be political maneuvering, but Chono and Six just come off looking like real dumbasses. Like, they are constantly just being outmaneuvered at every turn, and not even in a way where it feels like it's supposed to show how out of their depth they are and how they just were not prepared for this situation. They're just being outmaneuvered by a much smarter opponent, because they're presented and set up as like these characters, again, Six especially, set up as this character who is totally in control and like totally knows what is going on and has a handle on the situation, but yet they're being, again, like dog walked by this random secretary. And this could have been a really good chance, I think, to develop their relationship while they're like stuck in this location together and being like forced to rely upon each other and facing all these hardships. But again, it just feels like the relationship does not develop at all until the author decides it needs to develop at an arbitrary point 300 pages into the book, and then they just have a romantic interaction, and that's kind of it. It's just like it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't, again, paced very well, I don't think. There's all this other stuff that's thrown in the mix, I think probably to set up for this big finale in book 3, but it felt like stuff just coming out of nowhere, political factions that, again, were not in the first book that are just thrown into this book and then suddenly become very important. Characters in both plot lines being suddenly coming out of the woodwork as like cackling evil villains, and then being very easily defeated to be replaced by a new overarching cackling evil villain who I guess is going to be like the big bad of the story, but it doesn't feel very well breadcrumbed. There are so many like twists and betrayals at the end of this story, fake outs and real, that it just stopped having any impact on me. I was just like, this might as well happen. It just, none of it felt very well executed, which was a shame, because I felt like book 1 felt very well executed. That was something that I really enjoyed about it, that the twist at the end I didn't see coming, but that when I went back and like thought about it, I could totally see all these hints and things leading up to that twist. and the plotline at the end, like how the plot ends, it felt like the natural conclusion to the things that we had been building up throughout the story. Whereas in the second book, what is it called? On Vicious Worlds, it just felt like a lot of stuff came out of nowhere and happened very conveniently. I really can't get over dumbass Chono forgetting to turn on her anti-eavesdropping communication device when she's going to try to convince someone to commit treason. And she knows she's being watched by the government. Chono, what? And again, this is supposed to be like the political intrigue section of the book, and yet she's acting like a complete dumbass. So yeah, this book really frustrated me. I did not like it as much as the first book, but I will still read the third book in the series. It might be some time before I get it. There are no copies in the entire library system. I asked my boss to buy one. He did, but I don't know when we're gonna get it or when it's gonna be processed. So I will read it eventually. I think if this book had been really good, I would have gone out and bought it myself, and it wasn't good, so I will wait. Like, I genuinely don't feel any super strong desire to continue with the series, but I will because I only have one book left. I might as well. So, disappointment, but I still would recommend the first book. It was a fun time. Okay, I'll also talk about The Roads of Heaven by Melissa Scott, which I really liked. It is a book that I want to buy a physical copy of because the library gave me this omnibus edition that was absolutely gorgeous, and I would love a copy of that myself. I also picked up this omnibus edition without even like reading the summary of it because I just trust Melissa Scott that much, and I was rewarded for my trust with a bisexual throuple marriage of convenience in the first 50 pages. She always knows just what to say. Sadly, the marriage of convenience is not actually a big part of this series, this trilogy. This was a really interesting reading experience because I feel like mostly what I love about Melissa Scott's work is her characters and her relationships and her like social commentary. I love Burning Bright and I love Trouble and Her Friends because despite the plot and not because of the plot. I feel like they're both stories with kind of unsatisfying endings or endings that don't entirely make sense. Plot that is not super well ended, but the journey together is so fun anyways because there's a lot of fun characters and character dynamics going on, and there's something really interesting about her work in the way it deals with sexuality and gender despite a lot of it being written in like the 80s and 90s. So that's typically what I'm coming to her books for, and the incredible world building. She always has really fun, inventive world building. Roads of Heaven is very plot focused and not focused on the characters and the relationship at all. Despite setting up this really interesting relationship dynamic in the first book, it's truly like just plot device in the first book. It never comes back up in the rest of the books. It's kind of just a reason for the characters to be put together when they're in like horrible situations or getting kidnapped or held hostage or whatever. Silence just like, these guys are my husbands, and everybody's just like, oh, okay, I guess we can't split you up. But the whole reason why they get marriage of convenience for in the first place becomes such a secondary part of the book. Like, it never becomes an issue throughout the rest of the book that Silence is a female pilot and women aren't really supposed to be pilots, or then that Julie is not a citizen and he, you know, you need to be a citizen to do some stuff. I guess that marriage of convenience really worked out for them. But it's very plot focused, and the story is really about them trying to find this like hidden road to Earth that has been locked away for centuries. There's like 3 major political groups in this world. There's the Rose World, which is this like core planet system, very closed off system that is hiding the path to Earth. And then there's the Fringe, which is like a collection of independent merchant worlds. And then there's the Hegemony, which is the evil empire. Basically, they are taking over planets, colonizing them. It's this very kind of orientalist empire that heavily restricts the rights of women, does not allow 3-way or gay marriage, but other planets do, and they desperately want to find the road to Earth. So when Silence and her 2 husbands get kidnapped by the Hegemony, they go rogue, escape, and they think that the only way that they can like not be chased by this evil empire for the rest of their lives is to successfully find the path to Earth and like hand it over to them. And that's just like, I don't know, just such a weird motivation for me for them to be trying to go to Earth, that they want to buy their freedom back, I guess. But then by the end of the book, they end up working for the Empire because they have been successful in like changing the regime, but nothing has fundamentally changed about the Empire and the way they treat women and the lower class. They just successfully managed to swap out the guy at the top. So it made no sense for me that they would be working for this Empire and be their instruments and be successful and instrumental in finding Earth for this empire, because all 3 of them have very legitimate reasons to hate the Empire and not want to help them, and only one character really brings that up at the end of the third book, and Silent's main character kind of struggles with that fact that she has become the person using these torture techniques against this prisoner, knowing that she was once subjected to those things, but doesn't really ever come to a conclusion or decide that it's wrong or decide that she doesn't want to work for the Empire. It's just kind of assumed, it's a kind of hinted at the end of the third book that the person who's going to run Earth now that the hegemony has found it is going to make it like more of an independent city-state as opposed to actually being part of the Empire, and it's gonna, you know, things are gonna be better. But because the book ends so abruptly, we don't really get to see any of that happen, which I think is a weakness of this series and its politics. But still really interesting world building. It's true science fantasy where there's basically no technology except on Earth in the final book, and the spaceships are powered by alchemy, by magic. It's a really fascinating system, and Melissa Scott knows it because she will monologue to you at length about this alchemy system, and it's like a harmonic system. It's so interesting, and you do get monologue to a lot about it, but I didn't mind that because I found it so interesting. So I did really enjoy The Roads of Heaven. It's so interesting to see how her work has developed and strengthened. I really do think that she learned to focus on her strengths of character and relationships as opposed to being very plot focused and kind of having the characters and their relationships feel like a secondary afterthought, but I still did like it. Let's also talk about the 2 Vampire Chronicle books I read in January. I'm trying to finish the series before the third season of the show comes out. I put off continuing the series for so long because I don't know, the first 3 books are good, and then the last 3 books seemed fun, but there's so much you have to slog through in the middle to get to. But I finally made it to the crazy ass books, and I'm so happy. I did not think I was gonna like Blackwood Farm because it's a lot more Mayfair stuff than it is Vampire Chronicles stuff, but I actually really loved Blackwood Farm. It's about this family that lives in the swamp, the Blackwoods, and Quinn is the main character. He's this insane Mary Sue bisexual teenager. He is so interesting. He has been haunted by this poltergeist goblin his entire life, and Goblin loves Quinn, but like makes a lot of problems for him kind of accidentally because he just doesn't understand, you know, humans. So the entire book you're trying to figure out what Goblin is, why he's dealing with Quinn, see if Goblin is going to become violent or a danger to Quinn and others. There's so much interpersonal conflict within Quinn's family and so many problems that he is dealing with. It was so interesting to me. Quinn had more of a kind of quiet, laid-back voice as opposed to Lestat's inner monologue, which has gotten crazy over the past like 5 books, and I just really enjoyed it. Weirdly, I felt like the vampire stuff felt so tacked on to this story, and I think I would have preferred it had it just been like a standalone about this like weird family who lives in the woods, because the vampire stuff, you know from the very beginning of the book that Quinn has been turned into a vampire. That's the whole like framing narrative of the book. He's like, Lestat, I found you, I've been turned into a vampire, let me tell you my story so that you can help me. And it just felt like it abruptly cut off a lot of those really interesting interpersonal conflicts, because turning into a vampire obviously means that he doesn't care about those things anymore, or they're just not relevant to his life anymore. So it was kind of disappointing. And then the sequel, Blood Canticle, is so bad because we're back in Lestat's head. He is very annoying in this book. The book opens with him complaining that people didn't like Memnog, complaining that the sheeple didn't like Memnog. Anne Rice is still in her Catholic era, so it's a very Catholic, a little preachy. It's dealing with the like Mayfair Witches Taltos lore, which I didn't read Mayfair Witches. I'm not interested in Mayfair Witches. The characters were not very interesting, and we have this insane, a lot of the book, if the book had focused more on Quinn and Mona, which I thought were very interesting characters, especially from Blackwood Farm, and had a pre-existing connection to, I think it would have been a lot better. But instead, we were focusing entirely on Lestat falling in love with Rowan Mayfair and desperately like doing whatever she wants. And it was just so confusing, and it made no sense why he was so in love with her after only knowing her for like 5 seconds. You know it's a good love story when like 7 side characters are asking the main character, like, dude, why are you so in love with her? And he never has an answer. He never has an answer. He never can pinpoint why he actually likes her. And it's just such a weird dynamic. I don't know. I didn't like that one at all. But then we got to Prince Lestat, and that was pretty fun. We get back to the meat of the Vampire Chronicles there. We are back in Vampire City with Lestat, Louis, Armand, Benji, Sibel. The whole gang is here. This book's weakness is that it is the Avengers Endgame of Vampire Chronicles books. There are so many POVs, and half of them are really interesting and really fun to follow, and half of them are utterly pointless and add nothing to the book. This is where an editor could have really helped her, but it was okay. I enjoyed it. I had fun. Prince Lestat in the Realms of Atlantis. I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun because she cuts out a lot of POVs. She does address the fact that Quinn and Mona have seemingly died off page, which is very sad, but okay. And it felt like the POVs that she focused on actually added to the story. I have to applaud the audacity to add aliens from Atlantis into your vampire story. 12 out of 13 books into the series. Like, I genuinely just have to appreciate that. Like, who was doing it like her? Who was doing it like Anne Rice? She was a very special woman. She's also firmly out of her Catholic era at this time, and so these books are both very anti-Catholic, which I kind of appreciated. I enjoyed it. She totally retcons Memnoch. He is not the actual Christian devil now. He's just a spirit or alien spirit who thinks he is, or who is like gaining power off of pretending he is. So that was really interesting to me as well. Yeah, I just enjoyed it. I have heard the last book in the series is very bad, but I can't read it because my library has all of them digitally except the last one. Very interesting, but we'll see if I can get a physical copy or just buy a copy. So I can't wait to finish the Vampire Chronicles. I can't believe it's finally happening. It's been like 5 years probably. Okay, I think that is enough. I also would like to talk about how I've been doing with my, again, journey to read more nonfiction. I did successfully read 17% nonfiction this month. I've been doing this thing where I roll a random number generator, I pick the book closest to that on the Dewey Decimal System, and I read that, and then I also have been trying to read more of the new nonfiction books at the library, the ones on the new shelf. My library got an Octavia Butler biography. Felt like a gift just for me. I read it and really enjoyed it. I just wish it had been longer because I feel like it was less a straightforward biography and more of like an analysis of the way that Octavia Butler's life and the political climate that she was living in impacted her work, and there's a lot of really interesting analysis of her work. But the book was just a little too short to really dig into all of her novels equally, and the ones that I love were kind of brushed over, Xenogenesis and Fledgling, whereas her more popular works like Parable and Kindred were discussed in depth and had a lot of analysis of them given, which was still interesting, but I just wish it had been a little longer. And I just don't think I have anything, well, I have things I could talk about, but it's already been 40 minutes, so we can't be doing this. We can't be doing this. So thank you for watching my February wrap up. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and let me know what books you have read this month, if you have any new favorites, if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!